I'm going to do my best to teach you the basics of district planning, and with any luck, we'll be able to help show you just how big an impact adjacency bonuses can have on your games, starting today. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell to keep up with the channel. Alright, so I got my Tim Hortons coffee here. I think I'm about ready to get going. What I'm going to do here is show you the basics of district planning for religious, military, scientific, and cultural civilizations. I'm going to basically just go from one to the other, showing you the kind of things that you want to be paying attention to. One of the first things you want to keep in mind when you're planning districts are any bonuses that are inherent to whatever civilization you happen to be playing with. So we picked the lovely Khmer here, and they have monasteries of the king. So our holy sites provide +2 food and 1 housing if placed on a river. Holy sites trigger a culture bomb. So it goes without saying that you should definitely be keeping this in mind as you're planning the districts for your city. Okay, so their next one here as well, the Grand Berets, they get +3 faith and an amenity from entertainment to each city with an aqueduct, so that's also something that we're going to have to keep in mind when we're planning cities and districts with this specific So this is also something that we're going to have to keep in mind when we're planning our districts with this specific civilization. Say that 10 times fast. Alright, so the major things that we have to keep in mind when we're doing our district planning as a religious civilization is the holy site gets 2 faith from each adjacent natural wonder. That's obviously pretty easy to remember. As we all know, that natural wonders are few and far between, so it's something that's rarely going to be applied in most games. Now, you get +1 faith from each adjacent mountain tile, regardless of what actual tile set is underneath them here. Now that can add up very quickly, not to mention the fact that mountains are a lot more common than world wonders. You also get +1 faith from every 2 adjacent wood tiles. Now definitely keep in mind that's not like it's not 0.5 faith per wood tile. You need exactly 2 in order to trigger this bonus. So if you have 3 wood tiles beside your potential holy site, you're not going to get 1.5 faith generated from them. It's just going to be a 1 adjacency bonus because of the 2 woods. You also get an extra faith from every 2 adjacent district tiles, as well as an extra faith from each adjacent government plaza. And finally, you get another +1 faith from each adjacent Pamukkale tile. I'm not exactly sure if that's how you pronounce it, but that's what we're going to roll with today. Now that we have that in mind, when we're looking at our starting situation here for planning our district, as a new player, you might sit here and look at this and be like, oh, well, there's some really nice tiles here. I mean, we could go and we could pop our holy site down here because we just talked about it. We get +1 adjacency for every mountain tile. So if we put a holy site here, we're going to have +1, +2, +3 adjacency to start with, and that's definitely a nice adjacency bonus. And I'll totally agree, yes, it is a nice adjacency bonus to start with. The problem being that it requires us to have irrigation in order to get rid of the bananas and place our holy site. And so on very low difficulties, this might actually be a great start, but when I'm doing the teaching, I'm basically teaching as if we were playing DD games to hopefully one day get you to the point where you play on DD comfortably. So for us, this would actually just be a restart, because on DD you need to basically beeline straight for astrology in order to get your religion game going, and sometimes you don't even make it there when you go straight into astrology and straight into a holy site. So for us to have to go into pottery first and irrigation next and then to astrology before we can place our holy site, it's just absolutely impossible. So this is just a re-roll. All right, now this is definitely looking a little bit better for us. So first things first, what you want to do as a new player, or even a more experienced one for that matter, when you're looking to plan your cities, you want to turn the yields on. In order to do this, just hit Y on your keyboard and it toggles them on. So for anybody who doesn't know, these yields are basically going to show you exactly what each tile is going to give you for production and food and gold, depending, and whatever else, culture, science, etc., whenever that tile is going to be worked. So you definitely want to keep this in mind as when you're looking to settle cities. Now for us, we already spoke about it. We're going to be looking to get our holy site with the biggest adjacency possible. Not to mention, you also want to plan for your other districts as well. So looking at this off the top of my head, for one, it's a great start. We know that if you remember, we have that bonuses for starting our holy sites next to rivers, so this definitely fits into that category. As you can see, we have some spots here that we're not going to need technology to get rid of in order to place the wonders down. So keeping in mind that we're going for a religion here, what we're going to do is say, all right, we know we get +1 adjacency per tile for mountains. So straight off the top, we're going to look to place our holy site here. Now, this holy site will get a base +3 adjacency for being next to 3 mountains here, 1, 2, and 3. Now you might, as a new player, you might be wondering, well, why place it there instead of, say, over here? I mean, wouldn't it be good to just get a 2 mountain adjacency and not overwrite your rice? And I would argue the point that, while sure, that the +2 adjacency isn't bad whatsoever. I mean, you're just going to miss out on the era score essentially for getting this high-powered holy site, but you're actually going to be missing out on a lot more than that if you do a little bit more planning. So for our other districts, you know that science is obviously a great thing, and while you'll have to have animal husbandry in order to get rid of the cattle on the square, if we were to drop a campus here eventually, this would also be a fairly powerful campus, because the campus will get +1 adjacency from this mountain here, and then the campus will also be adjacent to 4 different, oh sorry, my bad. The campus would also have another +1 from 2 different jungle tiles here, so that would be +2, and then if we were to even take this one step farther, and if we plop down our city right here, then not only would this campus get another +1 adjacency, bringing it up to a +3 campus, because it would have +1 from the 2 different adjacent districts, +1 from the mountain, and then the third adjacency being from the 2 jungle tiles. That's great for the campus, but this specific placement also helps us boost our holy site even further, because now what was a +3 holy site, and nice enough to begin with, it's going to get boosted by our 3 mountains, but then we're going to pick up an extra adjacency bonus because we're going to have 2 more districts right beside it. So now our holy site will actually go up to +4 once we get our campus up online. I know this is pretty basic and fundamental, but you need to keep this in mind as you're planning your cities, because these adjacency bonuses really add up very quickly and can ultimately be the difference between winning and losing when you're playing on the harder difficulties. Now, I think for beginner players, sometimes I do plan out cities a lot more complicated, as in like putting government plazas in there, and maybe even planning the first 4 or 5 districts or some specific wonders that might be helpful. But I think as a newer player, it's best if you just focus on planning a couple different districts when you're planning each city. And then once you build your fundamental skill level up, the more you practice this planning 1 or 2 districts, it just is almost second nature that you start thinking this way, and then it's a lot easier to build upon that foundation and get a lot more detailed in planning your districts after that. Alright, so for our military district planning phase, we're going to be playing with Shaka here. Now, while he has some great bonuses for a civilization, they don't specifically impact planning our districts. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the game. Alright, so the encampment is definitely one of the easier districts to plan, as it doesn't have adjacency bonuses here, as you can see here. Yeah, the only thing that we have to keep in mind is that we can't place it adjacent to a city center. Other than that, it's pretty much open. In a perfect world, the things you want to consider when you're building your encampments, if you get the choice, is to either take up a tile that you're not going to be really using a lot of, or say, for instance, in this situation here, if we were to build an encampment here, it would definitely serve as a nice defensive bonus, because any units that are going to attack your encampment would have to attack over a river and would have a combat penalty. Alright, so looking at this start, it honestly isn't the best of starts because of the lack of fresh water. So I realistically would probably re-roll this one, but we'll just do a quick planning here because, like we said, it doesn't really matter, because as we already mentioned, encampments aren't that important other than strategically essentially is the thing that you want to think about the most when you're going to place it. I mean, sure, they do give your other districts adjacency bonuses, so that's something to keep in mind. So now, with that being said, if I were to play this map, which I wouldn't, I would just re-roll this. What I would do would be, I would look to set up my city here. Now this is because, in case you don't know, if you build a city on a plains hill, you actually get 2 food and 2 production. It's essentially the best place to start a city is on a plains hill in this game. So what I would do is go ahead and place my district here. Even though we're playing as a military civilization and we're going to be looking to do domination, science is also a big part of that, as anybody who plays the game knows. So what I would do would be, basically, I would plan to build my encampment over here. As we talked about, it would have a great defensive bonus because of the river. Then what I would do would be, I would plan to build an aqueduct. Where is it? Here we go. I plan to build an aqueduct there. I would turn this into my campus, although it's not very, very good. It's kind of the best we have in this specific situation. And then right here, I would go ahead and build a commercial hub, because anybody who plays domination games knows that being able to fund your army is very important. So now, if you look at this setup here, the reason behind it, we got a district triangle going between our city and the campus and commercial hub here. So they'll eventually get +1 from each other. Now our commercial hub here, on the other hand, would actually get an adjacency bonus of 3, because it would get +1 adjacency for being next to 2 districts here, because your city counts as a district. And then it would also get another +2 adjacency because it's built next to a river. Now the encampment, as I said, doesn't get any bonuses, but that is definitely a nice strategic spot to put it in. So this layout actually leaves us with another possibility of improving our commercial hub's adjacency bonus in the future, as well as the campuses if we were to build another district later on in the game on one of the 2 tiles down here. So, as I mentioned to begin with though, I actually would probably re-roll this game just because it's going to take you so much longer to get this city up without any access to water, and I just don't think that it's worth it to struggle so much in the early game. You might as well just re-roll to find something better to work with. But it served our purposes for talking about district planning here. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to district planning for cultural games, which unfortunately is a little bit more challenging than the other types of games. Alright, so for the cultural district planning, we're going to be using Eleanor of France here. So, as we talked about, you always want to keep in mind your civilization that you're playing with, any leader abilities or tile improvements or districts, etc., etc. It doesn't go into the details here, but the chateau is definitely something you need to keep in mind when you're district planning as the French. So we'll take a quick look at that here in just 1 second. Okay, so here we go, our fancy chateau building, which recently just got a buff in the patch as well. So it's definitely not a district, but we have to keep it in mind where we're going to place these when we are planning our districts as the French. So it gives you +2 culture, which is definitely huge, as well as +1 appeal. You also get +1 culture for every adjacent wonder. It becomes +2 after researching flight, as well as +1 gold for every adjacent luxury resource, and it provides tourism after researching flight, and needs to be built adjacent to rivers. So we'll definitely have to keep that in mind here as we go along. Alright, so taking a look at the adjacency bonuses for our theater square, we have to keep in mind we get +2 culture from each adjacent wonder tile, +1 culture from every 2 adjacent district tiles, +1 culture from each adjacent government plaza tile, as well as +2 culture from each adjacent Pomacali tile. Now, this isn't one that we really have to worry about very much, as it's a natural wonder. So the ones that we can basically plan on and count on that we're going to have to be paying attention to is building around government plazas and other districts as much as we can, as well as wonders. Now, this is why I had mentioned that district planning for culture games is a lot harder than the other ones, because you don't just get natural inherent bonuses to your theater squares, you have to kind of build around them and plan them for wonders. Now, it's not impossibly hard, but it definitely can make things interesting. Now, I do want to take a quick time out here and say if this video is helping you at all, please do me a favor and leave a like on it. It goes a long way in helping a small channel like us get discovered, and I'd appreciate it if you would. Continuing along here, this for me would definitely be a reroll, because when you're playing the culture game, you definitely need to get wonders out in order to buff up the adjacency bonus of your theater squares, and we definitely do not have enough production to start with in this capital. So this is definitely a lot more production for us to work with. Alright, so things that we have to keep in mind. We already talked about the different adjacency bonuses for the theater square being a little bit more complicated than the other ones, as well as our unique tile improvement as the French, so we'll also be keeping that in mind. Now, when I'm going for culture games, I always do my best to get an early wonder. This is because we need to boost that adjacency bonus, and it is more difficult, so a wonder goes a long way to doing that. If you can get an early game wonder, it allows you to get off to a great start and get the extra adjacency bonus, as well as actually helping you get to the tech you need in order to build your theater square, because in order to boost it, you need to build a wonder anyway. So a great choice for this, if it happens to spawn properly, which it did in this game, is to go with the Temple of Artemis. Even on DD, this is a very attainable wonder to get, and it's very helpful too. Not only is it helpful for the adjacency bonuses it gets you, but it's also just a really useful wonder in general. Let's get some map packs going, or some map tags going on here so we can highlight it. What I would plan to do would be to plot my city down here to start with. So we would go ahead and put a camp improvement here on the deer tile. Then I would plan to place my Temple of Artemis here after we clear the marsh. Now, this is because we also have that chateau building as the French, which comes in handy. So I would go ahead and turn this into a chateau. Because remember, it's going to give us +2 culture, +1 appeal, and +1 culture for every adjacent wonder tile. So that would give us 3 culture by having one there. Now what I would do would be to go ahead and I would put our actual theater square district here. Now that theater square district is going to get it +2 adjacency from being next to our wonder, as long as we have any luck in getting that out as early as we can. Then what I would go ahead and do would be to go ahead and place a commercial hub district here, and that will get a district triangle for us going and allow the theater square to have another adjacency bonus, so it would be up to 3 at this point, as long as everything went well. Alright, so as you can see, we managed to, theoretically anyway, get our adjacency bonus for the theater square up to +3. Now, depending on how we explored here and what was around us, I would consider one of these 2 tiles, either this one here where the wheat is, or the grassland hills over here, to build our government plaza. And it would all depend on if there was a better city location that was either to the north or to the south, depending on the terrain, because I'd then ideally, whichever way had the better city location, that's where I would plant down the government plaza, so that we could get some nice adjacency bonuses going. Now, something to be said about the north here is that the camp unfortunately kind of limits the amount of adjacencies that you can get if we were to place it here. However, I'm not entirely positive on this, as I've never tried it, but I think after we build the Temple of Artemis that we could go ahead and harvest the camp anyway and end up building another wonder or a district here. But to be completely honest, I'm not sure about that. It's something that just kind of crossed my mind as I was talking about this, so don't quote me on that one. But now, so whichever one I went with, whether it was north or south here, going for the government plaza, I would then do my best to go ahead and build another wonder, either on the wheat square or the grassland hills, depending on which tile I chose for the government plaza's adjacency bonus there. That's pretty much it. But as far as other districts, if I had been planning on, if I had been actually playing this as a real game, even though it's beside the volcano here, I would probably go ahead and, attack. I would probably go ahead and drop a campus here. It's not the greatest of adjacency bonuses, but I would get +1 for the volcano there. And then I also wouldn't be wasting any of these tiles any of the production from these plains hills here. And then eventually too, depending on how it goes, you could also look to eventually set up an industrial zone here, which could also be really magnified if you were to go ahead. You could get a decent Ruhr Valley over here. And then we could also pop an aqueduct into this location here, and it would give that industrial zone another +2 production here. As you can see, this is a little bit more complex than we were talking about, but this is kind of what I mentioned too, that, you know, as a beginning player or a person who's newer to the game, start with the fundamentals, practice planning basically 1 to 2 districts per city you're looking to place, and then as you go along, it's easier when you become more familiar with the concepts. It becomes a lot easier to plan something more complex like this, where, you know, this is actually looking to be a pretty sick start as the French, and I might actually go ahead and play this one here. That's pretty much it. We'll go ahead and bounce into our district planning for a scientific civilization next. Alright, so for the scientific part of the district planning guide here, we decided to go with Frederick and the Germans, and this start definitely leaves something to be desired. Yeah, considering we are going for science, this is definitely a reroll in my opinion. I mean, it's not a good enough city to be a Petra city, and there definitely isn't enough adjacency bonuses for getting a decent campus online real quick. So we'll go ahead and restart. This could definitely be a better start than the one we just looked at. We'll head over and take a look. Yeah, so I would definitely say that this is a good enough start that we could play. We'd go with a turn 3 settle here. Now, as far as where I would be planning the districts and other such things, I would go ahead and drop the city right here. I would be planning on putting our campus here, which unfortunately we'd have to be able to get bronze working so we could clear that out. But unlike with the religion game, you can afford to take a little bit of time before getting your first campus up online. You don't have to just beeline directly for it. With that being said, what I would probably end up doing would be to go ahead and place our hands up. Well, actually, just 1 second. I'll pull it up here so we can quickly talk about it. Alright, so for our campus adjacency bonuses, we get it's very similar to the Holy Site, where you get +1 adjacency for every mountain that's next to it. You also get +1 science from every 2 adjacent rainforest tiles. So again, this works the exact same as the Holy Site one where we already talked about, except for it's just replacing the forest tiles for rainforest tiles. And then you also get the +1 science for every 2 district tiles. Same thing for the government plaza. And then geothermal fissures is something that you can also look out for. A great get a solid adjacency bonus there. Not to mention the Pomacali thing there, which is a natural wonder, but again, the chances of you running into that are few and far between, so we won't really touch on it too much. Now that we have those adjacency bonuses out of the way, we have to take a look here and keep our Hansa, which is our unique industrial zone, in mind when we're planning our districts here. So we get +2 production bonus for each adjacent commercial hub, aqueduct, canal, and dam districts, then +1 production bonus for each adjacent resource, and +1 production bonus for every 2 adjacent district tiles. The normal industrial zones get better bonuses for being next to mines and such, and quarries and whatever, but ours doesn't. So what I would go ahead and do then, as far as our planning in this situation, I would go ahead and drop a commercial hub here, which would complete the district triangle for our campus, and that would give us another adjacency bonus because of the city and the commercial hub. Now that would open us up for a slot here where we could build our Hansa. Now the Hansa would get +1 production for the incense and +1 production from the cattle, so it would start off at 2. So we go ahead and place an aqueduct there, and then we could drop a dam over here, which would give us some pretty sick adjacency bonuses. So we'd have the +2, +3, +5, +6 with the cattle there, then +8 with production adjacency bonus because of our commercial hub, and Unfortunately, we don't have a site for a canal. We could get the plus 10 adjacency going, but unfortunately it's just the way it is. We might be able to pop in another district here eventually, but I mean, I don't think it's really make or break it. I'd probably be a lot more inclined to just build a mine on this hill, or a lumber mill for that matter, now that they are buffed considerably. But yeah, so that's basically it. That's essentially what I would go ahead and do. We went a little bit off on a tangent here because we were playing as Germany, planning our Hansa district, but essentially when you're, as a beginner, you, like I said, you want to concentrate on basically planning your first district or two and just kind of go from there and use that as a foundation to build upon. So when you are playing scientific, the two districts you want to start and focus on the most would be your commercial hub and obviously your campus district, because in most situations those are your two most important districts, except for in odd situations like this, where if you happen to play with Germany or whatever, where your industrial zone is, or Hansa or whatever it's called, is another big important part. Especially when you are doing scientific victories, it is important to get one or two cities that have great production. You want to be able to think about building a Ruhr Valley. Speaking of which, now that I just made myself think about it, that's what I would do with this slot here. I would go ahead and that's where I would build my Ruhr Valley. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell to keep up with the channel. That pretty much completes the tutorial here. I just want to focus on giving you a solid foundation to sort of build upon and go from there. With that being said, as I already mentioned, if you found this video helpful at all, please do me a favor and leave a like on the video, or even drop a comment down below. I definitely appreciate it. And it helps a small channel like us get discovered and grow. But I'll shut up about that and just say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.